Hey guys, Loman02. Want to share 3 old school games. This first one here is actually the last one we chronologically played, but this is a rug Erhnam deck. So I've played previously a more aggressive rug deck. This one is a little more mid-rangey, and when I say that, it runs more Erhnamgeddons, has some more interactive cards in the main, and then it doesn't have like Flying Men, Scrib Sprites, Unstable Mutations in it. And it also has counter spells, so it has some interactive cards in it, as opposed to being a more pure aggro deck. So, unbeknownst to me, I'm playing against the deck. I do go ahead, and I don't know that at this point, I go ahead and sequence out Mishra's Factory and Mox Ruby here. Attempt to cast the Serendib Efreet, but because I've had to play an island here, the Fel War Stone actually taps for mana at that point. My Serendib Efreet gets countered. I go ahead and play out the Erhnamgeddon. And my opponent, unfortunately, has the moat. So I know they're on some version of the deck now. Like, generally speaking, there are other decks that play moat, but this looks very much like the deck. I am able to use the regrowth to resolve the Serendib Efreet there. I think that's actually pretty crucial to how this game plays out. Oftentimes you'd think, regrowth, you want to get a restricted card, but I think I have to out-tempo my opponent because the long game is always going to favor them. Now, that said, I have 2 counter spells in my hand, so I'm kind of thinking in my head, like, what best do I need to interdict on their side to prevent, to allow me to win, essentially. So, my guess is they probably have the highest volume of, 1 second, guys. They probably have the highest volume of permission. They're going to have disenchants, and realistically, the only way they can deal with creatures is going to be through probably STP and probably a singleton fireball. My guess is they probably have like some number of lightning bolts and possibly a red elemental blast main. Lightning bolt is kind of irrelevant. Fireball could do it, but it's very inefficient. Reb, they likely only have 1 of. So that leaves probably like 5 realistic cards they can deal with the Serendib Efreet, which can get over the top of Moat, which is one of the few threats that I have in the deck that can get over the top of Moat main deck. So I intend on using these counter spells to actually protect my threat, which I think generally would be kind of like a poor investment in Old School, but because my deck does what it does and it needs to play mid-range / tempo here, aggro control, I think it makes the most sense, because they have the Tome online, so they're going to be seeing 2 cards a turn. The fact remains, though, that they can only find, I think, realistically, like 5 cards that'll deal with it, and or possibly a Sarah to block it. So, my plan is going in, like, I'm going to have to use these counter spells to protect my flying threat. I only have 3 more in my deck right now, and I have absolutely no way to deal with the moat. So, other than burn, I only have Serendib Efreets, 3 more of them that are permanent threats that can actually do damage in this matchup, now that moat is resolved. As you can see, I'm drawing like Argothian Pixies, Curd Apes, stuff that really doesn't do anything. It's disrupting Scepter fodder. And or if they play like the Abyss, which I doubt they're playing, because generally you don't play the Abyss and the moat in the same deck. I have sometimes sideboarded both in, but generally I want one more than the other. I don't think I have to fear that. I do go ahead and just strip mine them. I want to kind of hit them on mana efficiency here. I could save it for Library of Alexandria, but if their plan is to try to get to 7 cards, then I'm happy with that, because I'll kill them before that happens. So they find an Ancestral Recall. I could have actually countered that, but here's my rationale. Like, and this may seem speculative. In Old School, like I said, there's only, I think, 4 to 5 cards in my opponent's deck. Well, realistically, at this point, only 2 to 3 cards left in their deck that can outright kill the Serendib Efreet. So I think not countering the Ancestral Recall and then countering the Swords to Plowshares that it found is actually more correct, because the probability of my opponent finding a 2 of, or possibly a 3 of, in the top 3 is pretty low. I mean, he may find permission and stuff like that, but I think, generally speaking, it's better in the situation I'm in right now to allow Ancestral to resolve, because the number of relevant cards that he could get to stop my game plan from winning is relatively low. Now, as it turned out, he did find Swords to Plowshares, but if I counter the Ancestral, he's going to find it in 1 turn anyways, the Jame Day Tome, so I think I'm happier to allow him to draw into cards that I assume are mostly dead against my onboard threat at this point. Could be speculative, but I think it's right. And I mean, without knowing his deck list perfectly, like, it's a guess. Like, if he has 2 to 3 Rebs main, then it's probably wrong. I continue to draw dead, but the moat does make a lot of my draws dead because this is a more mid-range style deck. My opponent for some reason, is very big into James Day Toming on their turn. It could be they're trying to make their land drops, but their mana is pretty well developed at this point. I think they can probably do it on my turn. They again miss on their James Day Tome. Now, I'm making another heads-up play here. I do get in for the get him down to 2, which means my burn's all lethal. I go for a Shatter because I figure my opponent's going to falsely protect this. I actually think that, you want to save counterspell there. I don't think you need 2 James Day Tomes to win this matchup. I think actually they're probably they're finding probably actively a lot of bad cards. Because Disenchant is a bad card in this matchup. This is a good one, and I can't deal with it at this point, so I have to say, okay, roger that. I give it Forest Walk, take my 1 off my Serendib, Efreet, and believe draw another Irrelevant here. Yeah, I draw another Erhnamgeddon, which I leave in my hand for Disrupting Scepter. My opponent goes for a Demonic Tutor here. Ends up, I believe, resolving a Recall. As opposed to getting the counter spells, which I think were right here, he gets Ancestral Swords to Plowshares, and I believe, let me double check. Demonic Tutor back. Alright, so you got Demonic Tutor back, plus the Swords to Plowshares and the Ancestral. I'm actually fine with that. I think it was more correct to get back. I let this happen because I can't block the Seer Angel regardless. I have another counterspell now, which is not bad. I let this resolve. They go for a Time Walk here. They go for their Ancestral here. And they start drawing more cards. So they're going to go very high on cards. No, I'm not counterspelling any of this stuff. My plan is, because I think they can draw so many cards that stopping their card draw is less relevant than stopping the cards they get with it. Now, I already see 2 counterspells in the graveyard, which means in my mind he probably has 3 to possibly 4 more counters in this entire deck, unless he's playing Reb. So I think it's fine to let all this card draw resolve, because the deck is not going to kill me fast. Mostly what he's going to draw is mana and more card draw. And all I'm looking for is burn here. So I want to keep the counterspell to protect my burn. So that's the plan I have going in. So I cast the Psionic Blast here to protect, or, to kill my opponent. My opponent has counterspell. I go for a counterspell. And my opponent loses the game here because we're able to get them on mana efficiency. And, I think aptly saving the counterspell. And the way we utilize our counterspells, I think, kind of shows how, in this matchup, which is probably not favored for the mid-range deck, you can kind of gain some advantage. And like I said, I do think that the way you gain advantage in this matchup is by not stopping the card draw. It's by stopping the relevant things that stop you. Because there's just not that many of them. They only have, the 4 Swords to Plowshares. They only have the 4 counterspells, the 1 mana drain, maybe 1 power sink, 4 disenchants, So, if you can, note what they've already played up to this point, in time, then I think you're generally going to be well off, and just beating them on mana efficiency and then card relevance. Alright. So, sorry for that long didactic rant. I generally don't think that's how, in most matchups, you'd use your counterspells. But in this deck, I think it's right. So I do think there is some flexibility in how the card can and is relevant in different matches. My opponent, unfortunately, keeps a 6er. It does have library at a minimum, so they'll be in a series of draws here in a second. I go ahead and just Chain Lightning and leave up Counterspell, but this game's pretty prosaic. I use Sylvan Library to draw 3 additional cards. I actually counter this for tempo. I continue to draw here. Go ahead and play out the Erhnamgeddon. I don't know. It could have been wrong to counter that. Yeah, it probably was, but I didn't want them to go turn 4 Moat here and just have me locked out. I go for a Strip Mine here, get in my attack. I know this is going to get countered. It does. It gets Blue Elemental Blasted. I just go ahead and Lightning Bolt my opponent's face, because if I draw a Psionic Blast off the top, I can just kill my opponent next turn. Or correction, I cannot kill them, but I can get very close. They go ahead and activate their factory, which I don't think they have the luxury of doing. Going back on mana permanence just to save damage is generally going to be a losing position for the deck because it's so mana hungry. At this point, I have an attack with Mishra's Factory plus Psionic Blast with backup if I want it. But what I instead, or correction, I don't have backup. So what I opt to do is just say, hey, all right, go. And whenever my opponent casts something that requires an extensive amount of mana so they cannot hold up Counterspell or Mana Drain, I'll just Psionic Blast their face. They cast a Seer Angel, which I don't know why. All it's going to do is block and die to my Erhnamgeddon. go for the Psionic Blast here and put them to 0. So, the deck my opponent's playing, kind of slipped a little bit. Wasn't able to kind of get some early traction and have the control elements needed to deal with resolved threats. And we're able to get there. And Sylvan Library obviously did a number. Sylvan Library has been great against blue decks for a long time. And I was kind of loath to even play more threats out because I kind of wanted them to Swords to Plowshares my Erhnam just so I could turn that 4 life into another card. Sylvan Library obviously a beating in the deck matchup. In regards to this deck, I'll do a very quick rundown of the deck itself. As you can see, it doesn't have, the 1-drop package of, Unstable Mutations, Flying Men, Scrib Sprites, all that stuff. Do have some Argothian Pixies, because they do block well against Juggernauts and stuff like that, or Suchis. They can also attack through them, I believe. Is this protection from artifacts? Yeah, it can't be blocked. It doesn't have protection from artifacts. It's got weird templating, but it cannot be blocked by them, and all the damage reduced to 0. 2 Shatters main, because this deck does have a difficult time dealing with artifacts. Could run Crumble, but I don't think that's right. Looking at the sideboard right now, I think... Oh, I do have Energy Flux. All right, yeah. Energy Flux, I think, is an essential card for this deck, just due to the fact that, it only has the 2 Shatters main. Obviously, I have Red and Blue Elemental Blast, which is a big pull to playing Rug-style decks. The biggest issue Rug runs into, and you see this Tranquility here, is that it cannot deal with enchantments. So a turn, a resolved... A Resolved Moat is very problematic, or Resolved Abyss can be problematic, but we have the factories to kind of deal with that, but there's only 2 in the deck. So, that first game was interesting from the standpoint that I just can't deal with Moat, and I only have 4 actual permanent threats that can actually attack into it. 2 control magics, I think it's very good in a heavy creature meta. Same with Earthquake. This deck I was playing in, I think, in a more creature-heavy meta, black and white aggro-style decks. Whirling Dervish, obviously a phenomenal board card against those style of decks, especially the black ones. Generally speaking, Argothian Pixies will come out for them. But this deck is a little different, distinguishable from the previous Rug deck I played because it's it's more of a mid-range deck, and it plays, generally speaking, pretty fair old school. But it has some cool things going on, just kind of a tempo build, like I was saying. Alright, so this next game is another deck that I have yet to show. This is Mono White Prison. It is a Howling Orb deck, so we mull down to 6 here. This hand is not great. Oh, what happened there? Oh, my opponent mulliganed to 3. That's right. Alright. So, game 2, we'll actually get to play a game. And we actually do lose one of these. So my opponent goes turn 1 Birds of Paradise. They get a Sylvan Library down, which is very potent. I could have gone for the Relic Barrier there, but I thought I wanted to develop my mana situation. My opponent appears to be playing a similar deck to what I was just playing, like probably an Erhnamgeddon style deck, like a Naya build. I'll go ahead and balance here and just discard 2 of my lands. I think I'm going to be fine with that. I'm a land tax-based deck, and I just want to buy time here, because that's a pretty decent-sized clock. I just opt to go for the Howling Mine, say, hey, I guess we're going to do this. My opponent disenchants the Relic Barrier. I go ahead and tap the Howling Mine so they don't get to draw the extra card, but I will on my turn. Little Howling Mine trick. Unfortunately, I do not find another one. I go for the Winter Orb here just to slow them down by 1 land drop. It's not great. I get the Time Walk turn here, which is going to be 8 damage, which is a pretty big beating off the Erhnamgeddon. I believe my opponent plays down a Syrah Angel this turn. So they're down to 1 card. Their draw is obviously working out pretty solidly. We're able to do a Return to Dust here, and I play out the Howling... correction, I don't play out the Howling Mine here. It's possible I should have played out the Howling Mine, but I kind of wanted to restrict their mana. But in retrospect, yeah, playing Howling Mine was better than playing the Disenchant, because this is a Wrath of God deck, and if I had drawn... I get a card deeper that way. My opponent obviously gets a little deeper, too. But it looks like they're not a burn-style deck. They just have creatures. They may even just be... Oh, they're Bantamgeddon. So, they may have Psyblast, but otherwise they're probably not running burn. Maybe like a Miser's Fireball off their Cities of Brass. It's hard telling. But this game, we just get overrun. I think if we had gotten the Wrath and that that draw with Howling Mine there, we probably turn this game around and can win, depending on what kind of counter magic they have in hand. But we get overrun pretty rapidly there. This third game, we get to kind of showcase what this deck does. It gets to do its thing. So this hand is not great, but it does have a Wrath of God, a ton of artifact mana, and a Winter Orb to kind of slow them down, and it has one piece of point removal. I see birds, and I'm happy it's not a turn 1 Sylvan Library. I just go ahead and resolve this thing, play out the Caracas here. Opponent plays out Strip Mine, but I believe nothing else. They just say go, so I'm putting them on like Power Sync pretty solidly here. Or possibly like Artifact Disruption. I just continue to play my lands out. I don't think it makes sense to keep them in hand. And I'm just waiting to draw. Like, I'm just going to hang out and keep on drawing cards and hope I don't just get blown out. I debate playing the City in a Bottle. I don't, though. My opponent, on their turn, just goes ahead and Strip Mines me 3 times. So, Strip Mine unrestricted. Although it is also going to be a detriment to their own mana development because, they're required to play cards like Llanowar Elves. And it's going to make fixing a little worse. I mean, right now they only have 1 blue mana available. I do go ahead and play out the Howling Mine here despite not having a Relic Barrier to tap it, which means they're going to draw cards. But I figure with Wrath of God, I'm going to be fine with that because it's going to allow me to kind of get back from behind. Find a pretty good one right there. I find balance, which means my opponent discards all of their lands, discards all their creatures, and we stay at hand parity. That was a good pickup. City in a Bottle obviously would have looked a lot better if it had not been Seer Angel that was played, and instead it had been Erhnamgeddon. I do play the City out here. My opponent taps Disenchant mana. I'm fine with them disenchanting this because it means my Howling Mine stays in play, and I've kind of reduced their mana to almost a negligible amount. They do get the library out this turn, which, is a thing, but they're already drawing a significant amount of cards, so I tend to be okay with that. I go ahead and just play Tome out here because I kind of want to obscurate what I think is the most relevant. I do think when you have the Disenchant, it is most proper to disenchant Howling Mines. If a deck is running Howling Mine, there is a very good reason they're running it, and it's probably better for them than it is for you. Not always true, but generally speaking, if a deck is running it and the player knows what they're doing with Howling Mine, it's going to be good for them. Now, obviously, getting a Time Walk turn and getting 2 extra cards off Howling Mine is pretty good. Time Walk plus 2/3 of an Ancestral is never bad. I go ahead and just play out the Winter Orb here. I could play out the Howling Mine, but I think I want to just, hang out and force them to develop their board to a higher extent and kind of develop my own hand. Realistically, what I'm looking for here is for them to do something like that and also to find more board control cards. I find land tax is great because that means I can probably eventually gain some life off the Ivory Tower. I just go ahead and play them all out. So my opponent's at 32 cards. They are going to mill fast. They continue to crumble my non-relevant cards. I do think Howling Mine is the most relevant thing to destroy, and they've had the opportunity to destroy it with both Disenchant and Crumble. That's how my deck's going to win. It's actually my threat, if you will, because they're going to mill before I mill, and I have the ability to gain a pretty substantial amount of life off the Ivory Tower. They continue to play their creature threats out, which, like I said, I'm fine with, because eventually I'll find stuff like Icy Manipulator, more Wraths of God, and as long as I'm not dead, my life total is not that relevant in this matchup, because they probably only have 1, maybe 2 Psionic Blasts. It looks like blue is their lightest splashes for power cards. They may have none. My opponent just continues to play out things and stuff. They crumble my Ivory Tower, which, alright, I'm not getting life anymore. That stinks. Obviously, J-Tome is not really a combo with Winter Orb here. I do have Icy Manipulator to tap down my own Winter Orb, which is kind of one of the sub-themes of this deck. But right now, in this matchup specifically, I am, looking more so to do board control. But my opponent is down to, 19 or 18 cards now. And, they're pretty close to milling out. They realistically have to find some good threats and put a clock on me again. They blow up the Winter Orb, which, if I'm going to get an untap too, I tend to be okay with that. I would prefer to have it in play. This also means that their Mishra's Factory can attack again. And I believe they get themselves a secondary Time Walk turn here, which, when Howling Mine is my threat, Time walking is actually fine with me because that just gets me one step closer to killing you with my threat, which again is like mine and like some Mistress Factories. So continue to take Llanowar a beat down here and tap down the Mistress Factory. I could have tried to tap the elves, but my opponent would have just activated in response. I didn't have enough mana to tap down both the factory and the elves. Fight a Dust to Dust, which is a very good pickup here. I go ahead and play out the Fel Warstone, play out the Return to Dust, blowing up their two most relevant pieces of artifact mana. What I'm looking to do is this. I want to force them to play underneath an orb effect if I can make it relevant. And I also don't really care if they draw cards. I mean, like, I just want to make them as mana inefficient as possible here. So they can only, like, essentially play, like, one card through the funnel each turn. That's kind of the idea. Note you can also use Icy Manipulator like you would the Relic Barrier to tap the Howling Mine down, but right now I just want to keep myself alive and not dead to Psionic Blast, so I think that's probably the best way to play it. I'll take 1 damage here from the Llanowar Elves because the Icy Manipulator is tapped down the remainder of my opponent's threats. I still have this Wrath of God in hand. Note. Draw a boatload of cards. I got a Strip Mine, which is awesome because it means I can deal with the Mishra's Factory, which is not horrible. Play out another Jaymeday Tome, just to get it out of my hand, frankly. And if my opponent does Time Twister, I really don't want to redraw that nonsense. So get a Felden's Cane and say, all right, cool, go. I probably will Felden's Cane here because I have a lot of goodies in my graveyard, my discard pile, as it were. Get Armageddon here. Go ahead and tap down the City of Brass to dome them for 1, and everyone loses their lands. Which is fine because I have just a ton of lands in my. You know what I probably should have done actually though. I screwed this up. I should have actually Felden's Caned in response to the Armageddon. So I guess I get to tax this way. I don't know. It's not. I don't know. That's kind of tight. I mean, I do guess I get to tax this way, which is kind of cool. But I could have increased the density of my cards in deck by a significant amount, but I guess it's pretty close. Go ahead and tap down the blue mana here because I don't want them to Time Twister. They kill the Ivory Tower, which still is wrong. City of Brass should not work that way. Well, actually, let me read it. Yeah, they shouldn't be able to play that land. They played it as a Lotus Petal, which is actually wrong. Moto's broke that way. City in a Bottle should stop it entirely from being played. So again, just tapping down the blue mana because I don't want Time Twister to happen, and they should mill this turn exactly. And actually, at some point, they're going to die to the Vice too, but it's not going to be before they run out of cards in deck. So that was that set of games. So I'll pull up this mono white prison deck that is actually pretty fun. This is the build right here. It's fine. I think it probably requires some further tuning. But the way it works essentially is you use Icy Manipulator and Relic Barrier, which I think it probably could run more Relic Barriers. Actually, that list kind of looks, it needs some work. Use them to tap either Winter Orb or Howling Mine to generate draw engines. At some point in time, you turn on all the Howling Mines to mill them out, and you can actually turn them off for yourself so you don't mill out to them. So it's in some ways similar to a Stasis combo deck, but I think this is a much more resilient way to play it. Has tons of artifact and enchantment removal. Has a Mirror Universe to kind of get back from behind, and if you played the deck originally, you could have used Mirror Universe as a win con. We have Cities in a Bottle sideboard, which I think is awesome in this deck because this deck does not rely. I think it has one Arabian Nights expansion card. Well, I guess Kismet may have been. I'm trying to remember. I think Kismet was actually Arabian Nights as well. Tabernacle at Pendrell our favorite card of mine in the sideboard. Brought it in this game. Didn't become relevant. City in a Bottle, I think you saw was relevant. I believe I brought in an additional Wrath of God as well in this one. But kind of a cool deck. I think you understand how it works. You have to kind of see how it works in that last game where we just mill them out. Dreams combo is probably a little more powerful, if you want to just win fast. But this one doesn't rely on life totals. So if they're playing a similar game plan or they have a bunch of Ivory Towers, you can still win with this because there's no card like Emrakul that can just allow them to cycle indefinitely their whole graveyard back in the library. Now, the way you can do that, and it requires that you don't mill certain pieces, is Time Twister and Regrowth. Recall obviously can do it at least one time with Time Twister, but if you don't have a Time Twister in your deck, you're probably just going to get milled by this thing. So, or Felden's Cane. Felden's Cane exiles itself as well, and you know we run one in our deck as well, but we're not playing blue, so Time Twister's not an option for us. But cool deck, interesting kind of concept, utilization of Winter Orb, Icy and Relic Barrier and Howling Mind to win games, and then just a very large control suite. Alright, so the last game I will show you guys is the deck versus Erhnamgeddon, and it's a pretty cool set of games if Moto will pull it up. And guys, actually, I'm going to go ahead and cut it there because my phone is ringing and I got to run. So you've already seen the deck from me, and it looks like Moto's failed anyway. So enjoy these 2 old school videos, guys, and take care now.